you want to strike up a relationship with the person. So I remember in the early days, sort of just doing things where maybe somebody would look at me like, what are you doing? But it's still a reaction. Put your hands in your pockets, just a little reaction or not. But I think it's important to have the rapport. And from there, you're then messing around with your lighting, your processing techniques and your lenses.
Adam Lawrence, welcome to the Viewfinders podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much, Graham. It's lovely to be here.
You're welcome. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. Your work, for me, it's a blend of a few things, like it's technical, but it's not static. There's this kind of vibe and energy and humor that really grabs my attention. Really interested to talk about group shots with you, which is probably way too nerdy on my part. And also delve into your portraits. I think there's a lot to talk about, but bring me up to date. What have you been shooting lately?
Well, interestingly enough, I photographed a load of children at a primary school over the last few days. It's my son's primary school. It's like a little project where I'll go in and do the school photos, but I'll do them completely differently. Have kids with their heads sort of in wide angle, right up to the lens, or sort of, if they don't quite know what to do, I'll say, just put your hands in your pockets, and a little kid will put his hands in his pockets, and it's almost like a personal project, it, working with, younger children, and just seeing how they react and how I can get the best out of them, and for them to do natural things, or maybe things where they look slightly different because I'm shooting maybe from below them a little bit, which makes them look a lot more grown up. And I'm very, very happy with the results. But as I said, this is like a personal project. On the commercial side, I've just done a really fantastic composite image photographing members of the Coastguard. One of these TV documentaries where they follow people around, Meanwhile, back in Southampton, we've got so-and-so, the surveyor, looking at a trip. But we took 8 people that appear in the show, and we photographed them as individuals from a locked-off camera position. We'd already found a back plate for this image off a stock library, but it had to be a kind of something that looks like the coast, but quite dramatic is what I wanted. Nice, lots of cloud and the sea and rocky. And it's worked really, really lovely. Unfortunately, I can't share it to you right now, but I imagine once the podcast is out, we might find, I can put it up there. But we've got, a pilot in a bright orange, you've got a paramedic who would normally come down off the rope of a helicopter with a bag, with a backpack. It's just a beautiful image. Can't wait to share it.
Cool. I'm so excited. What you've said, I think, encapsulates what I find really interesting about your work, because with the school project, that's spontaneous portrait photography. It's in the moment. You're interacting with the subject, and you're finding something between you. Whereas with the Coastguard thing that you described, that seems a lot more front end planning, a lot more technical, a lot more kind of deliberate. And I think that's like almost 2 different headspaces, really. I could imagine you being split into 2 different people and never crossing over like that. Do you know what I mean?
It's interesting because I do think that it does cross over. We're talking about a subject with the Coastguard which is quite stilted. You can almost see the image of a paramedic, standing there with their bag. It's a lot more stilted than what we do, but there's a lot of time I've worked in comedy with TV a lot where you're still chatting to those individuals and trying to get something out of them, and it's a bigger picture. But you are right; you have to think how they're interacting with the other characters within that frame. In this particular case, it's all with them looking to camera doing their thing. They could just be staged, but in other ones, there's sort of elements where one group is interacting with another group that isn't actually in the frame when you're photographing them. So there's more, but generally I'm a people photographer, and it's about how I interact with people, which I think has been the reason for many people booking me out. Yeah,
with the school, I was wondering, is that you're not replacing like the school photographer? It's just a different thing.
I did it with when my son was at this school. It started with like, let's do a yearbook, Mm-hmm. That's how it started, and kids, as I said, just getting them to do something different, and they loved it, and they've kind of asked me to come back. It has a slight commercial element because I will sell the prints to the parents, but it's not a money making. I mean, it's not a serious money making exercise. It's hard work. You know, I'll spend 4 days at the school, so that I get really good time with each kid. When I say good time, we're not talking about hours here. We're talking like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But a normal school photographer, I think, would go in and snap for, you know, a few frames. Right, next, and maybe get a school of 800 done in a day.
Yeah.
You know, just a different approach. And those pictures are for the parents, and they love them.
I wondered if people appreciate that they're getting like a really, really high level photographer into photo, or they're just like, oh, it's just.
I'm sure. I don't know what the percentage is, but for sure, not everyone's going to get it. You know.
Yeah.
And I'll also make sure I just get a nice headshot of the kids smiling to camera within what I give them. You know, but the reaction. I mean, I met a mum outside the school. I'm taking the gear out. She goes, are you the photographer who does the photos? Absolutely love it. It's great to get. She got it. You know, the fact that the kids kicking up in the air. She got it. It's quite different. And I look at each one of these images and think that could be in the National Portrait Gallery. I'm not blowing up, but that's a really classic looking image. Do they get it? Probably 80% of them not at that level. 90% of them even. But it's still. That's why it's photography is a learning process, and this is something different for me. You know, and come that big advertising shoot where they need lots of kids doing crazy stuff, I'm ready for it, you know?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I mean, you're always still learning. I think that's really inspiring. So, let me ask then, what's your earliest memory of photography or how photography came into your life in the first place?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I've been asked this before, and it's really lovely. My grandfather was a very keen amateur photographer up in Manchester, where I grew up. And at the age of 7, he gave me my first camera. I think it's called a Kodak Instamatic. It's a funny thing, and to wind it on, you used your thumb. It was obviously film. It was in the 70s. And the joy of taking pictures, my first roll of film, and getting the images back. I remember so well. The adults, and it was always looking up. With these angles of looking up, you know, it wasn't framed properly. But there's an awareness of what you're looking at that age. So that was my first photographic endeavour.
From there, I don't know how it is nowadays for kids, but when we were kids, when you had either a Polaroid or a film camera and you would get the prints, well, the Polaroid was magic, but you get the prints back, like you would expect to get them back next week or whenever. I wonder if that is the magic of photography is completely lost maybe on kids nowadays.
If you move on to the next stage in life where I got more serious about photography in college, and the whole idea of taking a picture on a black and white negative and processing that negative, and then the print, you know, being in that dark room with the red light and watching an image appear through the water. And I don't do that anymore, but it was that feeling. It was just like the Polaroid feeling you just said. There was special about that, but then being more creative because you're doing a print with the first one. Okay, I need to burn in. I need to do various things to get it out. But it's a shame that is lost. I do see a lot of the younger generation. When I say the younger generation, you know, the kids at college or out of college in their 20s, queuing up outside the few film and processing labs there are. Like it's this magical thing, which is nice to see. But I'm not going to discount. I'm not one of these people that is like, no, it should have always been analog. I embraced digital. But I did it from a place where I knew what I could do with analog. And, you know, when I was at college and wanted to be a photographer, I was really interested not just in the taking of the image, but how that image could be manipulated. I like the idea of everything being cross-processed or scratched up a little bit, or there was a process we spoke about Polaroids back in the late 80s, but it's called Polaroid image transfer, where you take a picture on a Polaroid and you wouldn't wait the full, you know, these are professional Polaroids, you'd wait 2 minutes, usually an assistant with it under their armpit, you know, and then peel it apart and get to see what you had. You'd peel it apart after 10 or 15 seconds. Obviously, the image on the receptor, the positive, was was very faint. You could just throw that away, but it was still on that black sort of negative, and you'd transfer it to a bit of art paper. Maybe it was slightly dampened, and you'd brush down with your fingers, brush each way, and then you'd peel it apart, and bits would come away. But that, basically, it was just another way of taking a photograph that had messed up with how you looked at stuff, and that always appealed to me.
So you went to college to study photography then?
I did. I actually went to college to study film. Here's the interesting thing. My grandfather was an inspiration to me. He actually gave me, later on in life, a stills camera and a Super 8 film camera. And I went to a grammar school in Manchester that wasn't very creatively challenging. You could do design technology, you could do art. I took the design technology route, but when I left school, I wasn't sure where I was going, so I did an art foundation course. This was after a year off. I took a year out, but I went to do an art foundation course, and that's where I sort of realised I wanted to go in the film and photography direction. And I went to a film college in London that had a photography department working in tandem with the filmmakers, and I kind of ended up sort of swapping over.
What was it, do you think, about the photography that overtook the film?
I think it was also getting towards the final year that I realised it was an easier means to an end, first of all, right? That you're going to finish college, and if you wanted to be a filmmaker, you had to depend on so many other people to make the show reel work, to get your foot on the ground. Whereas with photography, it was a lot easier and quicker to put a set of pictures together, to go out. I like the smaller group idea, and just taking hold of the situation a bit more quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so in those days, was it always like people in portraits that you were into, or how was your work in those days?
Yeah, I mean, this was really early on, and I always felt I was a people photographer. It might have been a bit more sort of documentary based on when I went travelling after college as well. It was, it's kind of a reportage style. I did enjoy placing people. Portraiture, but with whatever I had available, which is still what happens today, to be honest with you.
And so, when you went travelling, was that an influential period in your life? What were your sort of takeaways from that? Most
of all, the reason for going travelling was just to see the world, right? Which is the best education. Whatever you did at college, to go out, especially in those days when there wasn't the internet, and it really was like going out to the Wild West, and 6 weeks in between sort of having any contact with your family back home, and it was very, very different then. So it's the experience of new cultures. But obviously there's a camera there. I remember being in India, and there's a festival called Holi, which is a very celebratory festival with lots of powdered paint being thrown everywhere. And I've got this picture of a sadhu with colour paint all over him. But it wasn't the driving force. It was when towards the end of travelling I got to Australia and looked in a local magazine where I was that said if anybody wants to share a darkroom, I'd hire it out for $10 an hour or whatever it was. I could go back and process some film and do some printing. I think the love would definitely all came back to me from there.
Work-wise then, how did you segue into being a professional photographer?
I ended up back in Manchester after travelling over the 7 years, and my father had passed away, and that's to kind of try and hold his business together, which was completely different to photography. It was in textiles. And within a few months, I realised it just wasn't for me. I'd studied in London, I was back in Manchester, and my mum said, look, let's just wrap it up. You go back to London and do what you really want to do. So I moved in with a friend, a group of artists in the area. I was starting up some art studios, old abandoned military place, and there's one room, I think it was the old ammunition dump, that said, do you want this as a dark room? Right? It was already blacked out. Oh no, we blacked it out, but it was very, very secure. I could put my equipment in there and the whole of this sort of thing, and so I could pick it up from there. I found that my way in life, I think with a lot of people, was a lot about who I knew as much as what I knew. And I had a friend who was starting as a junior press officer at Capital Radio, and another friend who was working for a theatre. And in those first 6 months, I was taking photographs of of stage acts at this Fringe Theatre, and I was taking portraits of people like Chris Tarrant, if you remember him, and Kenny Everett. Just press photos to start off with, and I did the headshots for their cards, and that sort of introduced me to the commercial side, but also the theatrical and the celebrity side, I guess. And that's moved on to MTV, VH1, Channel 4, Channel 5, and I think that's where it all started for me.
Yeah, that's a great start. I wasn't sure if you were going to have been assisting or anything, but yeah.
No, I did do some assisting. Let's go back to that. I sort of my family had friends in Manchester. The guy was running studios that did all of Littlewood's catalogues. There's a lot of catalogue photography going on in the northwest. The studios are in Manchester, and I was like a studio runner. So I did get a taste for commercial photography even before I started college on the film course. What I did take from that was I didn't want to do fashion. That's how I found it a little bit pretentious, let's say. At the time, it just didn't suit me. But I got an idea of the lighting and the medium format, and also to shoot transparency. That everything was shot on transparency film, which I'm sure a lot of people, the older people, will know. But when I went through, got the other part of my career, my main career, and was doing a lot of editorial back in the day, I used to deliver transparency. And the beautiful thing about transparency is you had to get the lighting spot on. There was none of this, we can fix it on the computer later. Mm-hmm. Everything had to be lit correctly, it had to be bang on. Greatest learning point, I think, then moving into digital.
Lots of sort of iconic 90s characters in your portrait portfolio.
Yeah, there are.
Just to jump into those days then, the portraits, the 90s, well, how you handle portraits generally. Do you, like, your work has this energy and vibe that I just can't put into mine. I was wondering how you plan for a portrait session, or how spontaneous you are, or how you get that balance right, and where your vision comes from. If you're photographing a musician or something like that, like you said, do you just go in and see what happens, or are you going in full of ideas?
You want to strike up a relationship with the person, the people that you're photographing, there's no question. And on the most part, they are there to get good photos of themselves, to either promote a program or whatever it is, an album cover, I don't know. So you want to have a relationship. And once you've struck that, you hope it's a good relationship. Or I think I sort of remember in the early days sort of just doing things where maybe somebody would look at me like, what are you doing? But it's still a reaction, much like the kids today, put your hands in your pockets, just a little reaction or not. But I think it's important to have the rapport. Mm-hmm. I believe I've always had that. And from there, you're then messing around with your lighting, your processing techniques, and your lenses, and how it all comes together. I'm going to jump a little bit because I was away the other weekend, and I was away with a film director and I filmed the TV director, a couple of other people, and I was like on my phone. We're in Italy, right? You stand there, you stand there, you stand there. It was what you do. I said, well, I like to take every photo as if I'm composing an album cover. So these guys, all in their sort of position. I always thought that was a good analogy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you're shooting an album cover, it's just got to have a cool kind of vibe.
A vibe, or something that people looking to do different things. And taking that into, say, a corporate shoot. Let's not forget, outside of the celebrities, but I do different things. I get called in to do different jobs, and I can light a corporate shoot a bit like slightly wild with the colours and get them looking off and in different positions. And they love it when they see it, and then the press office would always say, "Have you got any straight ones?"
Yeah. So building rapport was the first thing you went to. So that's something you're very intentional about at the beginning of the session. Someone comes in, you want to go straight in there and start building that trust. Absolutely,
100%. So the early days, as I said, was at a well-known radio station in London. And I'm a little bit nervous with people like Kenny Everett, he was so mad. Mm-hmm. He just adhered to you anyway, so you let him take over a little bit. And I just think the early stages of just feeling comfortable with big names. And I think to this day, very few people faze me when they come into that situation. I think if I ever had to photograph one of my idols who's no longer around, say Joe Strummer or David Bowie, it might be slightly different, but for the most part, about the relationship and finding their humour and seeing if we can take them a little bit further than they normally do, which is easy with celebrities and comedians.
Do you find sometimes with celebrities, actors, musicians, they're photographed a lot? They're just not interested, or you're able to get through that?
As I said, generally, people are there for a reason. On the odd occasion, someone's really busy. They've got to move on. They're not in a good mood. It doesn't happen that often. And, that can lead to situations where you feel maybe you've not got the best out of them. But there isn't much you can do about it, is it? Someone saying, right, I'm going to go now. That's it. Fine. Off you go.
Yeah. And so you build that trust with someone, and then if it's a portrait, when I'm seeing portraits, I'm thinking about the things that appear spontaneous. Like there's the DJs at Carl Cox. There's another guy who's got like a cigarette, and it looks like a hat, but I think it's a record behind his head.
Oh yeah, that's Giles Peterson. Yeah, they were very early photos. Right?
So I think what I'm getting to is about the level of spontaneity and how you imprint. Are you imprinting your personality on the session, or are you kind of,
I definitely think that I am, just trying to take it up to a level. Both of those guys are DJs and they're both up for a bit of fun, Carl Cox, just remember to this day, great guy. You're trying lots of different things out of the studios. I mean, if I remember correctly, Carl Cox has got his hands on his glasses, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sort of doing that with the kids still today at the primary school. The kids got glasses on, but short, just like put it slightly off on your nose and look at me with one eye,
Yeah.
Just seeing what they've got in front of me to make a cool image.
Let's jump forward then. It seems to me, you tell me if I'm getting this right or wrong, but you're doing the portrait kind of stuff, and then later you're doing more of that compositing kind of group shot thing.
Yeah.
Was there like a segue? How did one thing merge into the other?
Do you know what? I honestly can't remember, but there's definitely a big old difference, isn't there? So doing the single portraits, and even on my website it sort of states, kind of, I think one's called entertainment, which is generally groups of people or pairs, and then there's portraits. But I wouldn't remember off the top of my head the first time I got to do a composite thing, but I knew that I enjoyed the challenge, I guess, the technical challenge. On top of everything else, it's the technical challenge of you're not going to get everyone in one go. And me realise, well, actually, it's better if I get them. There's a lot of people, say 8 cast members of a show. If I can get them individually with a backlight, I can light them individually and just concentrate on that one element, where it's spread. You can get shadows from people. You can always build in shadows, but I think it definitely all started through my connections with doing stuff for TV. I've worked to this day. I'm still doing a lot of television work, and I'm sure I wasn't the first to comp people together. It's being used a lot now. A lot, loads and loads of shows. People just being shot individually. I've noticed more and more. But yeah, back in the day, I think one of the early ones, I'm trying to remember from mine, doing a thing for 24 hours in police custody. It was a Channel 4 show. I'm sure it's up on the site somewhere. But I remember I had to, first of all, do some research and just put like police shows, cop shows, promotion, getting stuff from America and seeing what they did, just for some inspiration. And then we decided, right, we're going to do it in we're going to make a backplate, the background image, which is a cell. Not a cell, but the corridor for some cells. And I went down to the police station at an abandoned cell area, and it's quite a small corridor between, the two sides. And I took a number of plates from the left to the middle to the right, and I got my retoucher to extend it. I knew this was going to be a bit of a pillar box, a letterbox image. which would give me an area in the middle to play with all the characters I was going to photograph. And actually, now I remember it. This was one, not quite, usually you'd shoot against a grey screen. I say grey, not green, but I'll be very clear about this. Green gets some cast coming back. It's always a grey colorama. But now this one, I remember now, we shot it in the actual, that thin corridor. So I had to keep thinking how the three sides, left, middle and right, were going to be.
Right.
But I just remember shooting them individually, having an assistant being able to stand over them with a bit of a key light, which would represent the sort of harsh lighting on the top. That was going to be at a certain angle that would get it from the left side, the right side. It was very much put out, and I was very proud of that image. Being able to think a little bit more outside of just don't plonk them into something, see how the light's working.
Well, you get into that when you start. I mean, if you want to craft it, you start to think about how it goes together logically.
You've got to.
Yeah. You said earlier that you were quite interested in experimenting, and you said the thing with the Polaroid, and I was wondering when digital became available, if that opened your mind to just, these things would be possible, or you embraced it easily anyway.
No, absolutely. I think that, I know that on certain software, I mean, I use Capture One as my raw processing software. I don't know if you use it yourself, but I'm sure a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest ones are the people who use Lightroom, but Capture One is what I know, and people will have sessions, where it's desaturated, there's a bit more crunch, there's some vignetting, that are already preset in there, or you can make your own. I don't think anything comes close to the original analogs of cross-processing, but if you have a look and mess around, you can find different feels, that are slightly different, and maybe relate to that. So I play with a number of those sessions, and I've got a series on my computer, and it does go down from sort of quite contrasty black and white. And I'll get some idea of how something should look on the screen as it's going on. Of course, in these sort of commercial, in a commercial field, you'll do something and it goes off to a retoucher, and then it'll have its own grading anyway. But I am thinking of those old ways, but doing it to work with digital.
Okay, let's look at, for example, the email comes in or the phone rings. They want you to do it's Channel 4. All of your stuff looks really Channel 40. They want you to do a group shot for a new show. What's the process from there? I'm interested in unpacking like the front to end from there to deliverables, and how it's like on the set, who's involved, who's in charge, what your place is in it. Can you go through something like that for me?
Right. So you want to see some of the pilot or some footage. You want to get a feeling for the show, if you can. So it's not always there available, but quite often there might be a new series on something, so they've got the old series. I know that I've been penciled for a Sky show called Brassic I was watching. I've never watched Brassic. Apparently it's one of the most, popular programs on there, and I've never watched it, so I've watched the first one last night. I want to get an idea, and also look at maybe what other shots have been done before, so I can do something a little bit different. I will then insist, if it's a composite shot, that I really need the backplate before I put people in front. It's not always possible, and there has been a few where I haven't, but you don't have, you won't get to do that special lighting. You won't know where the flashing light from the ambulance is, or the harsh light from above. So I want to get a backplate first, and quite often I'll photograph them myself.
Okay, so the backplate, just for people listening who may not understand, is the background image, or it's the image that you're putting people into. Exactly.
It's the background you point it into. If it's one you've done yourself, you're measuring the height of the camera. And when I do a backplate, I'll get my assistant or assistants to jump into different positions where it's locked off. So I also have an idea of people's heights and how they work. You'll never see that, obviously, but I've got it on the side of my computer screen as I'm doing the more final stages, or as I'm photographing the people, I can place them in. So I've got an idea of height and stuff. some, as I said, there's two ways of shooting the people, right? Some are against a grey screen, just the way it works. You might be in a completely different place to where the backplate was, or a number of them, including the 24 hours the police cell shot, are done within the situ, and I just literally lock the camera off and place people in. The only difference is you've got people standing around them with lights that will then get cropped out, and everyone's got this kind of surreal look where the lighting is in place. Yeah, so that's it. But you can build. You also sort of work as you're building up at the time. There's always an art director or a publicist with you who wants to see how it's coming along.
Yeah, is the art director? Do they come in with a clear idea or a storyboard, or it's not as tight as that?
It's not as tight as that. I've generally found I've got a free reign. I think when it gets to more high-end advertising, they've got more of a constructed idea of how things are, but you're still going to be finding your own route through that. Adding to it as it goes along and finding new things.
Okay, and so having them on hand, though, you can really build it together.
You need to gauge they're getting what they want. I like the idea of having perspective. I like people right up close to the camera and people further back. Quite often they'll turn around and say, "That's great, well, it's great," but the producers of the show want to see everyone a little bit more in line, which kind of ruins the perspective of it. But you've got a commercial duty as well, to keep production happy.
And so you photograph everybody there. You have the ability to light everybody individually.
Yeah.
Everyone's perfectly lit, as it were. And then on the day when it's signed off, it goes away to retouchers. It's out of your hands.
Yes, to an extent. I like to have control with the retouchers. I like to use my retoucher. Touchers, excuse me, a few that I use. And be involved in that part of the process, just like I was involved in the printing when I was a student. I do think they are developing what I've created, and I really want to be part of that. Sometimes it's not possible, so it's the way it is. We'll just take the raw files and we'll deal with it. Okay, but you need to make the grade close to this. This is what I've done. But I think your clients are generally happy for me to have a little say as well in what goes on afterwards, at the very least.
Yeah, you're so good at those images. Like, you're so good at them. There's the technicality of it, but the vibe that I've always been saying about your work is usually present as well. It all comes together so well, and it's really on brand for like Channel 4 or something a little quirky like that. So I just think I'm a big fan of that. So I do corporate work, and it's, they want to get a group shot, and I've got one client where we've got this rolling group shot we've been doing for like 4 or 5 years, where people leave or they have a new service and they'll have someone else in different PPE come in and we change up the group shot. So I love to do that, but I had this shot a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago where there was going to be 10 people. It's an accountancy firm that I do a lot of work for. And so I had to go in. They've got a big space in their sort of office in the foyer. And what I really wanted to do was composite. But when I got there, I was like, oh, it's going to be too much of a faff. And I ended up just putting massive lights and far back and just lighting the whole thing. It was okay. Yeah. But I felt like I'd bottled it a little bit. But I hate group shots. I don't know about anyone else, but doing a group shot with a group of people, I'm always trying to talk people out of it. And get people on board with in the world of corporate of compositing. You get everybody lit, everybody's at their best, there's no crap shadows. You just can't do a group shot well, right?
Yeah, listen, I feel your pain, and I've been in those situations myself. I spoke earlier about the album cover and corporate stuff. Wouldn't it be great if you could shoot a few of those guys a little bit closer to the camera, some a bit further back, and just play with it, get maybe pairs, groups of 3, and then you can just concentrate on what they're doing and recreate it. Even if, as you say, if it's in an atrium and you've just got your camera locked off, it would be wonderful. You need to mark on the floor, I think, roughly where everyone's going to be, and if somebody does leave, then that space is then empty to put someone in. That you can light in the same way. And they probably just want it quite straight, or standing in a line, some sat in front. It's out of your control, but you can just try and push the boundaries a little bit. And it happens all the time. I mean, I've got a job coming up that was with 8 cast members for this comedy, and they want it they want it all in camera. They want the 8 of them, and it's taken me a couple of weeks to come to terms with it. Yeah, it can work. It can work, but I'd rather have this lot at the back, this lot at the front. This, fine. Yeah, we'll make it work, and you will have to pop more light in there, and it'll have to be more lit from the front, because obviously, otherwise you have the shadows that are harder to remove if you place them there yourself. It'll work.
Okay, well, we'll come back to dive into one of these pictures in a minute. When you've been talking, something that's come up to mind has been that you're compounding your ideas and your skills. So you're taking things that you learned from photographing maybe musicians or singers. You're adding that to the school photo shoot. When you're going to learn something from that you're going to add to a future commercial or entertainment kind of shoot. Is that compounding of skills and improving as a craftsman? Is that something you're very intentional about?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to be moving on the whole time and redeveloping yourself on how it works. What you can learn from children, for example, and taking that back to the corporate arena, or even just working with different people is always going to be beneficial. You're going to learn different things, and you're going to be able to go into a boardroom with people that haven't had their pictures taken on a corporate level and know how to make them feel relaxed, and comfortable. So people skills, constantly developing. I say it's one of the stronger points that I've got, believe it or not, with everything that you see in front of you. And the other bit, of course, is lighting, and how things move on with that, and trying different ways of lighting. We spoke a bit about Channel 4, and this all looks very Channel 4. Yes, it does, but things move on. Field there's more of a realism now, generally in publicity photographs. They're not so into the high pass, the cross-process look as much. So I need to adapt to it, But I still like taking things a little bit further, because it's who I am. You should change guess who you are, and but you can adapt.
So, of all the things that we've spoken about, what do you think your biggest strength is as a photographer?
People, just communication with people in front of the camera, and getting stuff out, working with people, always.
It comes across. I get that. It really does.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to me. I would just love to be there, see what you're doing, learn as much as I can. But okay, let's talk about camera gear for a minute. What kind of camera do you use, and what's your favorite lens?
Right. So I've for the most part of my digital career, I've been using Phase 1 cameras or Phase 1 equipment. Phase 1 backs originally with a Hasselblad body, but in the last 5-6 years, I moved on to Phase 1 cameras and full systems using 100 megapixels back and 3 prime lenses. I've always used prime in a studio environment. It's locked off, you don't have to mess around. In some of the other work I do, it means using a handheld camera. And I've always had Nikon equipment for that. For many, many, many years, I used the Nikon D3X, which is like a 24.5 megapixel camera. And, the number count of images I took was ridiculous. It's supposed to be, been put to rest at like maybe 100,000. There was it. 3 million frames, and it was still going. But sometimes I do work on set as a unit photographer for TV. It's just another string to the bow. Very, very interesting, because you don't have a full team of people. You're working on the back of a film crew, TV crew, and you have to be quiet and not get too much in the way, but you still need to have a voice to make sure they know you're there and you've got to get your shot. So that is a different way of dealing with humans. But most importantly, when they're filming, you need a silent camera. And the new mirrorless cameras have solved that so well. It used to be you put a box around your camera, it's like a blimp to keep it quiet. So my latest purchase as of December, just gone, is a pair of Nikon Z9s, which has, to me, just been revolutionary to the extent that I'm using them in the studio as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit
Beautiful camera.
Yeah, I've heard. So I'm on the Z. I'm getting a Z something.
Right.
Anyway, I'm saving up. Let me put it
You're
that way.
saving up. It's not cheap, but it revolutionise. Are you on Nikon yourself?
I am, yeah, but it's, it's like the body, okay, fair enough, but now I need to get different memory cards. I think it might be different batteries than I use, and it all kind of adds up, so I need to save a bit harder than I have been.
They also have Z lenses, for that. They're just bigger, where they fix on the camera, and you can find an adapter, but you'll lose half a stop of light to work with your old lenses. It's all fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were investing, you're going to get out there and work a bit harder. It's worth getting the Z lenses as well.
Yeah. With your lighting, do you bring in your own lighting, or does it belong to?
Yeah, I've got a fair deal of my own kit. I've got a load of Pro Photo, the 8As, for a few generations back. Generally, I've always bought second-hand equipment, and usually, again, people that I know, when Wex was known as Calumet, and previous to that, they'd be selling off their old hire equipment, and it would be covered by their people to repair it if it went wrong. And I used to use Bowens the whole time. I accumulated maybe about 15 packs, 20 heads, all in various states of disrepair. By the end of it all, they just started failing all over the place. But I currently own 3 8A packs and 6 Pro Photo heads, which generally are very good. They're a lot faster than Bowens, but they're not worth the price to buy them brand new. That's for sure.
Yeah, they are expensive. But do you find with 6 heads that's enough for?
If it's not, I can hire in.
Get in, yeah.
I can definitely hire in, but it's enough for most things. I've also got some battery operated Pro Photo heads, B1s. Them, which has been revolutionary because you just need a plug in. You can be outdoors. I've got like 4 heads and 2 packs. Not packs, 4 heads.
Yeah, no packs.
8 batteries.
So okay, and then you're tethering into the computer camera capture one.
Wherever I can, because you can see exactly what's going on. Occasionally the whole process of shooting too fast can cause problems with the tethering, and I just pull it out. I'm going to shoot a card, and I'll give you the card at the end just to carry on.
I was wondering how you find the rhythm of shooting tethered. I'll shoot tethered as much as I can nowadays, because it slows me down in a good way, and it helps me to be more consistent. Yeah. If you're shooting, a bunch of headshots or whatever, you want that kind of consistency, at least in the shape of them, How do you find that? Sometimes, like you say, you just have to get the camera in hand. What's best for you, or does it depend on the situation?
In an ideal world, you'd have a tethering situation that doesn't jam up, have issues. Oh, wait a minute, we just got to reboot the computer. It happens. It's a pain, but in an ideal world, you would have a lighting assistant and a digital assistant. In the real world, it's usually one person doing everything. But ultimately, it's just to get it up on the screen. And if you can keep it on the screen, the benefit of that, anyone who's there watching, you go, we've got it. I know we've got it. It's like, great, move on next.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. This brings us to a round I call double exposure, okay? I'm going to ask you about one picture that I've taken a shine to, and then I'll bounce it back to you to tell me about one maybe that's got a great backstory or anecdote to go with it, if that makes sense. So, because we've talked about the compositing, I wanted to go somewhere completely different. There's a photograph here of Lily Ebert, I don't know, Holocaust survivor.
Oh, Lily. Yeah. Wow.
Again,
Wow.
I just
Yeah.
think you're so diverse in your work. We've got the compositing stuff. Within that, there's kind of wacky stuff, and there's more straight stuff. Like I noticed the Effie
Yeah.
Cup picture, it's kind of straight up composite. And then in the portraits, again, wacky celebrities. And then something like this, which is very, very human. What can you tell us about that shoot with that lady?
Sure. So this was photographed for the Holocaust Educational Trust, and through another company called Creative and Commercial, who deal a lot with kind of Jewish related charity. If it be like cancer care, if it be like school prospectuses, but they were working in hand with the Holocaust Educational Trust because a lot of the majority of Holocaust survivors are coming to an end now. You know, there's really not many left. And here we've got Lily Ebert, who lives in North London, not far from me. And they wanted a photograph of her initially, just her arm with the tattoo she had from Auschwitz, really faded, holding her, I think it's a great-granddaughter's hand, you know, which was clean and lovely and young, you know. It's supposed to be a very straightforward thing, but obviously at the same time they could just do with some portraits of her. I mean, look, with Lily, it's an incredible picture, but that is her personality. She's such an incredible person to be around. So inspiring, you know, and the whole reasoning of the campaign is, you know, when these things go, it's going to be harder and harder to remind people of atrocities that happened then and how it relates now. I felt a lot for the cause, but in that space with Lily, it was all about the humanity. You know? She survived. She's got a book. I read the book after seeing her. You know, incredible story. You know, of her and her sisters surviving together somehow through these things and all the stories. And there was a ring around her neck that she hid in the sole of her shoe through all of this. You know, she made a little space in her shoe. But when we got talking, she was just a joy, you know. I can jump on the table if you want to. I can do this. She's a bundle of fun. I mean, you know, people should try and follow her on Instagram. She's got an Instagram thing run by her great grandson, Dolph. Yeah, Lily Ebert. It's a sad but true thing. She's not going to be around that much longer. She's one of the last. But the life in that lady is so inspirational.
Yeah, it
really. I hope I caught it in that one moment of throwing a head back.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Let me throw it back to you. Is there a picture and a story, a shoot that just stands out for some reason?
Well, the normal point of this question might be like, have you got your favourite picture you've ever taken? You know, and I do. I'm not even sure if it's on the website. It might be in the archive. But there's an image of 5 of my friends in the sea. It's in Miami, and everyone's looking a bit deraggled and strange. And quite, it's not colourful. It's black and white shot. But I don't know if you've got it in front of you. It's taken. So that's taken on 35mm film in 1994 on what's called a Horizon camera. I think they were made in Russia, and it it's a strange little plastic thing. It didn't look like it was made that well, but the lens itself moved around in a sort of in an arc, and it sort of painted the light in a strip across probably 1.5 times the normal width of a regular 35mm frame, and it's quite a wide angle lens. So if you bent down, the horizon was bent, and which worked perfectly for this shot because you've got the sea in the background in Miami. And basically, it's a moment where we'd gone away for a friend's stag weekend in Miami, and that was the morning after the night before, and it just summed up the sort of surrealness of being out there. And it's my favourite ever picture. Not taken as composite, not with lights in the studio, just a handheld, strange camera on the sea.
Yeah, I think that sums up, though. It's all about people, a little bit of camera, quirkiness in there, and captured a really good moment. So
it has the perspective as well. You know, I was talking before about someone being back, someone being forward, and it was a moment. I mean, I caught 5 people in frame rather than shooting them individually. So luck was on my side with that one.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that. That brings us to the final round, which is the quickfire round called Motor Drive. So some quickfire questions. Okay, if you're ready.
Go.
All right. Wide angle or saying it again. Wide angle or telephoto?
Wide angle.
Okay. Color or black and white?
Colour.
Expensive lens cloth or the corner of your shirt?
Oh dear. I'm going to say expensive lens cloth. I just wish I used them. Sorry for all.
Yeah. What's a weird thing I can find in your camera bag?
Digital tape measure in angles, making sure that it's always the same distance for the things we were talking about before.
Okay, so you have the camera locked down. You need to make sure of your measurements, height,
distance. Yeah, I've got an assistant with like a load of notes to match one to the other. Coastguard. Just very quickly, we shot in two different situations. One was in Southampton, the other was in Newquay, and the pictures had to match. So to do that, everything needed to be the right distance, along with the right, and the powers needed to work on the packs as well. It was exactly the same.
I spoke to Gregory Heisler, who was one of my big heroes, and I was asking him about this shot he took of Denzel Washington. It's like a double exposure. It's a really, really cool shot, and it's got this energy because of this shift in the double exposure. And I was like, I mean, I've kicked the tripod enough times to know that you kicked the tripod, right? So he was like, yeah, he kicked the tripod. So what do you do on these when you kick the tripod? It's inevitable, right?
Yeah, and I also think that however much you're trying to be precise, you're always going to have room for movement, and it's not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It just isn't, as long as you're roughly in the same place. It might even be that your camera's locked off. It's just gone down a little bit by a few millimetres.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, Retouchers can sort out those minor things, without saying, do it on the Mac later. No, it can be sorted if you mess up a little.
Yeah, but you never want to have that fix it later attitude, right?
No, you don't. You definitely don't. But I'm just saying there is room. There is a bit more room for adjustment than we need to be at the just a minute.
Okay, name a photographer we should all know. Someone your hero, an influence, or just someone with great work.
I'm going to say David LaChapelle.
Okay.
I mean, if most people should know his work, if they don't, and you look at mine, especially the colour stuff, you might see a few influences. I'll say another one as well.
For sure, yeah.
Richard Avedon.
Avedon.
Yeah, Avedon, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that picture you mentioned before of Giles Peterson with a disc behind him and what you call a cigarette out there. I think you might find it's a jazz cigarette. He was done. I think the borders on there that was influenced by Richard Avedon exhibition that just come out.
I was just studying Avedon not long ago. It makes me sound like very serious, but I had a bit of a dive into his work for a couple of weeks, and I was so inspired. I mean, and if there's some interviews on YouTube, like the guy just gets it. Amazing.
Yeah, no, he was the master. I mean, incredible,
Yeah.
And going back to his era or my era, really younger, I was doing portraits on 5.4 cameras whenever I could.
Mm-hmm.
And then I twist it a little bit and change the planes and get bits and pieces out of focus.
All right, what's your go-to emoji?
Thumbs up, probably.
Just a plain old thumbs up.
Okay, it's quicker than writing yes. Good.
Yeah. Okay, it works.
Yeah, I mean it is, emojis. I'm still getting used to them. I've got a sister who loves social media and emojis and laughing out loud, and it's just getting used to it. Really. What's yours, Graham?
My one is there's a guy like sort of face palming or shrugging. I think that works for most things.
Yeah.
So I can send a shrug for almost anything.
Yeah.
So when do you feel at peace with the universe?
It always used to be, when a good campaign has come out, a good image you're really happy with, even for yourself, putting it on the screen, putting it big. That is a great moment, But now I'm a bit more holistic about the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
be happy with what you've got, family, I've got one boy, life's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do something not many people get a chance to do.
I want to thank you for your time, Adam. I've had to hold back from diving into every composite shot that's on your website because I want to ask about everyone. But for the sake of keeping people listening, I've decided just to not do that. But
we're going to bore the pants off them. Have a look at the pictures. Right? That says it all.
But yeah, I appreciate you. Really a fan of your work and the diversity, and I think you're really onto something. You've got a future here, definitely, for sure. So thanks for your time.
And Graham, I have to say thank you so much for inviting me on. I mean, I'm actually quite honoured. Really good, man. You've got a lovely voice. People say you've got a lovely voice for radio.
Thanks. Face to match too. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
That's it, man.